Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for coming to the Warrant Committee meeting for this evening. I understand we need to be sworn in. I have not had that arrangement made, so technically this is not a meeting that we can actually deliberate anything about, but we can discuss. So I imagine that we will have the arrangement made for the town clerk to come and swear us in at our next meeting, and we can fulfill our responsibilities to the town that way. Fortunately, the warrant for this year, this next special town meeting, it will not take place in October, which is one reason why we're meeting so late. You all have before you the January special town meeting agenda, and it shows us having the warrant for that meeting closed on the 15th of October. At this point, we would know, I think certainly by then, what is going to appear on there, and we may have rough drafts of the different warrant articles that we would need to consider. Concurrently, unfortunately, we will have to have the budget discussions beginning. As this schedule requires us to have Friday, December 6th, the warrant sent to the printer for the January 13th meeting, we will be exactly at that point beginning our deliberations for the budget. So we should have the budget, certainly for the schools, the fire, police, and public works in hand by then. So if nothing else, we should be able to begin the large discussions of the major budget items that we'll have. But we will have some work ahead of us as we approach Thanksgiving. Unfortunately, usually we have a little bit of respite before we begin the budget discussions, but we will be at full tilt at that point. I think that I will bring certain items to your attention that happened during the summer. In June, before the close of school, I toured the schools with Superintendent Mary Gormley and the Assistant Superintendent Glenn Pavlicek. She had invited us as a group, and I thought it would be a wise idea since the school building committee has already begun its work. I really wanted to see for myself, before we had any discussions about the condition of the schools and what the crowding issues really were. I was really impressed by several things. First off, the school buildings are really in excellent condition. I mean, they're reasonably new, but they're in very good shape, and they're being well maintained. The downside of that is because they were all built at about the same time, they're all going to be requiring a new roof, a new furnace, and all the other things, a new flooring, all the other things that come with it, unfortunately, at the same time. Where we have had testimony from the school superintendent about the overcrowding issues at virtually all levels is apparent at all of the schools. Tucker School is really maximizing every inch of the space that it has available. I don't know if they have another 20 kids coming in, where they're going to put them, other than closing the teacher's room or using that for a classroom, and I don't think that would be advantageous, and I also think there may be issues with the unions of getting rid of a teacher's room. Glover School is in somewhat less of a stressed position, but they have converted the art room, the music room, the computer room into classrooms. That was not contemplated at all when the renovations were done several years ago, but that's the condition. Pierce Middle School is in a little bit better shape. I don't think the situation is quite as acute there, but they are going to start to feel the pinch of more students, etc. Milton High School, I think, is in about the same position, but they have also converted the art room, the music room, all the enrichment rooms into classrooms, full-time classrooms, and this is a situation that is going to continue. So the discussion, I think, that is going to come at the next town meeting is going to be what exactly the building committee is going to come up with. Whether there's going to be an addition that's required to the existing schools or whether a whole new school building will be required. Of course, when you think about putting a new school in place, you have to think of all the things that go along with it. All the infrastructure for a school, a principal, an assistant principal, supervisory people, janitors, all the maintenance that goes along with that, and then of course a whole new raft of school buses and transportation schedule that go along with that, let alone finding a space in the town where you can put up a new school. We all know that the space is at a premium anyway. And I think that this is going to be a very interesting discussion. I'll be very, very curious to hear what the school building committee comes up with. it is really going to be, I think, up to us in many ways to vet some of the recommendations that are coming through. So this is really kind of an important year in a number of ways. There's also, as we knew last year, a revenue issue that the town has, that it's had for a couple of years. We had the override 3 years ago almost, and the question is going to be how we as a town are going to address the overhead expenses that we have, largely due to the very good, very professional, but very expensive municipal working contracts that we have in place for the schools and for the town. They're expensive, but the services are essential. Unfortunately, we do not have the sort of a commercial base that would sustain the sort of growth that some other towns may have. Our residential base is terrific. We all know it's a great place to live, but one of the things that we have to look at is alternate sources of revenue. There was a very interesting article in the Boston Globe a week or two ago, I don't know if any of you saw it, on the City of Boston's payment in lieu of taxes programs. I did. I mean, I saw the whole thing. I mean, this is music, kind of music to my ears. I mean, we love these institutions; they're great, but in fact, they are deadbeats. There's no other word for it. They have been really benefiting a lot by the largesse of the citizens, and not really showing a lot of benefit to the communities they live in. I mean, they would disagree with that, but I think I go back to my own. What have you done for me lately? And I don't see much there. So I think that this is a discussion that I have asked the town to accelerate with the institutions here in Milton. Using the City of Boston as an example, you find how reluctant the institutions are to contribute. I think that's not a surprise. I think there's a great deal of entitlement that comes with being a not-for-profit, and they do wonderful things, but the reality is we all exist in the same space, and it's not a vacuum, and you have to contribute in order to maintain that space. And I think that's a lesson that was missed somewhere along the line in some of these institutions. So I think that's going to be an uncomfortable discussion. Nothing like that is ever easy, but I think it's a conversation that we don't have a choice but to continue and to expand and to bring to the table our not-for-profit residents here in the town, whether it's Milton Hospital, Milton Academy, Curry College, or any of the others. To see exactly how they want to participate in supporting the town, which protects them, keeps them safe, and keeps the roads clear for their students and their patients, etc. I think if there's an agenda that we need to address as a group going forward, it is going to be that revenue side of the equation that, and I'm interested in anybody else's perspective, that a tax override just isn't going to work for a lot of people here in town much longer. We're already paying relatively high taxes, certainly compared to some of our neighboring towns. Again, we get wonderful services, and they do come at a price, but to sustain the level of service and to maintain what we want to have in this town is going to require a contribution from more than just the residents, who have been, I think, really putting their best foot forward all the while. Chris?
George, I mean, I think, we've been, for those of us who were involved with the Warrant Committee this last year, such as it was, I think there's probably broad agreement, and I think your words resonated with town meeting in this past town meeting, and so I think there's broad agreement. What I'm wondering about, and it's a question and not a veiled comment, is what is the role that the Warrant Committee can really play in terms of the revenue side of things? In other words, our job when it comes time to vet the budget is to vet the budget and to determine whether to stress test what the expense side really of things are, and to interview the stakeholders in town. With regard to revenue, we can make recommendations, it strikes me, but I'm not sure, number one, what we can do beyond that, and number two, to the extent we want those recommendations to have teeth, I suppose it's not really clear to me how we do that.
We can do it in a number of ways, actually. We do make recommendations. We are effectively the eyes and ears of the town meeting, and the town meeting has the ultimate authority of disposing bylaws, budgets, etc. I think our role is to highlight, as we have begun so to do, the issues that are before the town, and to propose ways for the select board and presumably the town meeting to pursue, where we are looking at the greater good for the town as a whole and not limiting it to simply looking at, oh, this line item is out of whack, you're paying too much for that buzzsaw. Let's see if you can do a little better. I mean, we can count the beans and paper clips all we want, but I think looking at the broader scope of where the town is, what the town's needs are, really does fall within our purview. Can we legislate? Absolutely not. Can we make recommendations? Sure. Will those recommendations have some value? I believe so, particularly given the representation, the ingenuity, and the insight that this committee has collectively is a very, very broad-based and sternly representative cross-section of the town. I think we have virtually all of the precincts represented. We have, very diverse points of view politically and socially in some cases, so that we, I think, are a microcosm of how the town looks, and what we need to see happen in this town is worthy of our opinion, and bringing that forward to the select board particularly, and knowing, I think the real power here is them knowing what we will be able to support given our role. How much can we really go to the town meeting and support recommendations that might come from the select board or the zoning board or whomever? I think that one is our particular, that's what we do. And if there are recommendations to be made and they're followed and they come back to us, we will have the opportunity to make those opinions have some teeth. And I think it's worth our time to look at this. But I think broadly speaking, we look at zoning, we look at the bylaw changes, we look at all these interesting things, and they're bits and pieces along the way, but the broad picture of where the town of Milton is, where it needs to go, based on the needs that are being projected for the next 5 to 10 years, is where we're going to be devoting a great deal of time.
So,
Kathleen,
that said,
Kathleen?
you talk about, we spent a lot of time looking at the expenses.
Yeah.
Can't we spend some time this year then looking at the sources of revenue that we currently have?
I think it's important.
I think I could probably guess at several things, but
Sure.
there might be things that we don't have. I just did a deck down in my Cape House in Dennis this past year, and I was appalled at all the fees that I had to
Oh, yeah.
pay, the user fees.
Absolutely.
And the architect that I had said to me that, I don't know if this is public or not, but he said that the fees that were generated, or taxes, were like $22 million a year, and the user fees were 24.
I believe that.
And I was shocked at that. So, I know that we've got a limited tax base, but so maybe we need to look at things
Well,
like that.
I have a house in Hyannisport, and we pay a personal property tax only for non-residents, non-full-year residents,
Right.
which, I thought there was a revolution fought about that sort of taxation without representation once upon a time, but it is what it is. And so, yes, and those fees are significant. Can the town look at something like that? Perhaps. I think there may be another way of cutting the onion, slice or peeling the onion back. One thing that we have discussed, and I don't know if it's made to the state of a proposal, but now there is an Airbnb tax in the city of Boston.
Yeah.
I don't see why we can't talk to some of our non-for-profit friends about having a fee payable to non-residents who are going to be resident in the town for more than 3 consecutive nights or 2 consecutive nights. And that would hit the patients in Milton Hospital, the residents in the dormitories at Curry College, and residence halls at Milton Academy. And that will be a pass-through. The residents would pay that, the parents would pay that. That's something that I think is, very informally a possibility, and that would raise, some revenue that would at least pay off bonds to keep things going in the schools. Christine, did you have a question?
I have a question.
Yeah.
In the absence of a CFO, is anybody developing a need plan, a revenue need plan? Because I suspect that payment in lieu of taxes and any fees we can drum up are probably not going to meet the delta. Is Mike's office, Mr. Dennehy's office, looking at that? Is anybody?
The town administrator, Mike Dennehy, and Amy Dexter, our town accountant, do collaborate. And Amy does, I think, the best she can, given all the responsibility she has, to come up with something that approximates a budget projection and potential revenue sources.
We're gonna have to start there. in my
Absolutely,
mind.
and it's unfortunate that CFO was voted down, because that's exactly where this function would reside. I mean, in any corporation, that's where it would be, and certainly in most towns around that have a function of that nature, that's exactly the function that a CFO would do.
Maybe as warrant committee, we can ask that be a priority.
Yes. Doug?
Yeah, we can make those recommendations, and I think the town planner even mentioned it last year before, is like we should recommend that somebody look at the fee structure in town, because those haven't been probably even looked at in like 30 years or something like that. And we can recommend that the select board put on the warrant an article for some sort of Airbnb fee or things like that.
Something of that
And-
nature,
And we
yeah.
can act almost like tribunes in ancient history of, we think you should be focusing your attention on this, and we can't really recommend in due conscience these other articles until you put some effort into these other things. I mean,
We
there
have
are
to be-
ways we can do that,
We
but
walk kind of a funny line, because we can't
We only
actually
recommend.
originate them,
no, we
because
cannot. We can only recommend, and we
we
can.
can't originate something that we in
and we
fact are
can
going to
say,
ratify and
We think
recommend.
you should investigate this possibility sort of
Right.
thing. But you're right, we can't originate, we can't write articles for the warrant or anything like
Right,
that.
exactly right.
Well,
Chris?
and I would just say as an aside, I think having that information up front in a consolidated place would be useful anyway, because throughout the year, we're constantly asking the same question. And,
Yes.
you know, and Mike Dennehy does a great job explaining what revenue sources are. You know, for example, the whole trash barrel exercise, as I understand it, the purpose of that exercise was to make sure that people were paying into the trash system, because otherwise it was easy to not have to pay for a sticker. But getting that information in a consolidated place so that we don't have to constantly ask that question and we have it at our fingertips, I think just as a practical matter would be very useful.
I think that's wise. We can certainly make the request.
Yeah.
We can certainly make the request. I'll be happy to do that. Does anybody have any thoughts about the idea of revenue, looking at the revenue sources in addition to looking to the expenses? I mean, heretofore, the warrant committee has looked at the budget as presented and not really, I don't want to say been mired down in the concept of raising revenue, but I don't know that we have much of an option, because, I mean, remember what we went through last spring, trying to slice and dice and take really the nice things away
Right.
in the budget. Hey, Wendy. Take these things away. It just becomes almost I don't want to say a failing errand, but it seems to me that the issue is not so much the expenses, it's absolutely the revenue. And to have that discussion, I think, is the right discussion to have now, particularly as we're looking at the fire station construction project and looking at the needs for the schools and the school building program, which is going to come forward very quickly.
And the busing issue that also goes along with the schools.
Yes, I understand that was we have larger student population, and then the bus schedule had to be altered and more
And
buses.
More people want to take part in that than we're allowed to, in my understanding.
Okay, I didn't
It's been
get
a
that whole
perennial problem, I
discussion.
think.
Was there, was,
That's been a perennial problem.
Yeah.
There are students and buses that they actually plan for.
Because people don't register on time,
That's
and
right.
then at
Yes.
the last minute,
okay.
they're like, we didn't get a bus for you guys.
Yeah, there are communications problems.
and is that ordinarily addressed, or can they address it at some level?
Typically, there's a wait list
Yep.
for those for whom we're not required by law to provide buses. So the elementary students who are X distance away, I don't know the exact distance. I know what happened this year. They were very clear about the deadline, register by this day. Emails went out, people didn't do it. And then in the summer, they all said, oh, wait a minute, I want a bus. And the school had already planned for the number of buses. So you had like a large number of people on the wait list at that time. Some of those people, I believe, made it onto a bus, because what happens in the first couple weeks of school is that some people don't end up doing it. Population shift, after school activities, take people off the bus in middle school and high school. So there's some space. I think they try to work pretty tightly with that. But I believe there is a significant wait list of people whose kids did not make it onto the bus.
Really?
And I think, if I can remember what Assistant Superintendent Pavlicek said when he was here, the cost of adding a bus is enormous. It's something like $80,000 for another bus. So it's really not cost effective to say there's, 83 people on the wait list, let's add another bus to the tune of $80,000. The bus fees that are paid don't really even come close to covering that. So,
Can I ask historically?
Aaron, of course.
Has the warrant committee, and I just am not privy to this information, has the warrant committee ever not recommended certain sections of a town budget to show that the revenue side was not there?
It has recommended, I'll answer that in two ways. Directly to your question, it has never not recommended something because the revenues weren't there. They have not recommended because they didn't think the cost could be justified, and that could be because they didn't think the item was worth it, or they didn't think it was worth spending the time on it compared to something else that might have been rather more pressing at the time. But to say it was a function of revenue, well, everything frankly is a function of revenue. It's like a household budget. Can we afford this? No, we really can't. We'll have to wait till next month or next year or whatever. And we look at it very much the same way. The difference is that the town has the power of taxation and the power of bonding. And heretofore, the town's AAA bond rating has been sacrosanct. Having spent 30 some odd years of my career managing other people's money through bonds, institutional bonds, I would argue that the differential between a AAA and a AA in this market is so infinitesimally insignificant, sacrificing the AAA would be in our interest to increase the amount of debt that we could take to support the town. Because the cost of a AAA versus a AA municipal bond is like 8 basis points in this environment. And hello, I would take that any day of the week. But the reality is that we still have the issues that we're going to be facing, the fire station construction and the school expansion, or addressing the school overpopulation issue, and I don't think that we're going to be able to avoid those concurrent discussions in the course of this fiscal year. And we already have an imbalance that I'm understanding could be as high as $1 million.
do you know what the timeline is of the school building committee?
The school building committee met for the first time a couple of weeks ago.
Okay.
And I think they had an organizational period before that. I believe they have just toured the schools. I went on a tour and I visited every school. And it was an extremely educational day. And I'm very grateful to Mary Gorman, the superintendent, and Glenn Pavlicek for taking that time to show me around. And I was impressed by the caliber of the principal in place. Each principal knew exactly where everything was, who was going to be where, the schedules, et cetera. It was extremely impressive. The teachers were clearly very motivated to make sure that the kids were where they were supposed to be and doing what they were supposed to be. And the allocation of resources, whether it was for the conventional students, student instruction, or for special education, it was remarkable how the space was utilized. It was utilized very, very, very well, which is why I'm saying I can't imagine shoehorning anybody else into those schools, because at that point you're going to start to sacrifice quality. I won't say safety, but you're certainly going to be sacrificing the experience that the kids are entitled to have, particularly after what the town went through to build these beautiful schools and put them in place and find this really tremendous faculty, all of whom were extremely impressive. And if I have school-age, almost have school-age grandchildren, I'll be happy to see them go in to these classrooms with these teachers when the time comes. So I think that there are issues that we have to be vigilant at this. I think this is kind of on us. Christine.
I ran into the head of the school committee at one of the school open houses,
Yes.
and I'm gonna say something that I know nothing about, so forgive me.
That doesn't
in
stop
advance.
any of us.
No, you're supposed to do it. This is
Here I go.
this is a group that's supposed to say these things.
She said that there is a discussion at the state level about the state funding. You know about this?
The schools, yeah.
No.
Reallocating how the state's spending on
Yeah.
education.
The special education would all come out of the state budget, not the
That would be
town
wonderful,
budget.
because right now it's an unfunded mandate, and we see the percentage that comes out of the school budget for special ed. Now, I'm not saying that's not warranted, but it's extraordinarily onerous
That
on the
would
town
solve.
as a percentage of the total.
But I caution us hanging our hat on that, because already the talks have stalled, and
Yeah.
already we only now have until the end of June to get this figured out. The chances of them doing a bill and going through conference committee and having this happen this legislative session is, I don't think it's, I personally don't see it in.
If the discussion has begun, that means that it's important to enough people that something ultimately will be done. I don't expect it to be done this year, okay? I mean, it'd be nice if cows gave beer too, but that doesn't happen.
That'd be fun.
Right, but the reality, craft beer particularly, but the issue is, I think, much broader for us. I just threw a wedding for my daughter, so I'm sensitive to the types of craft beer and what people drink. But anyway, the reality is that we have, I think, the discussion where special ed has been such a high-ticket item in the budgets for virtually every town in the Commonwealth, where it's an unfunded mandate of the state, and where you're siphoning, or I should say directing money to a group of students, a small group of students, and it's an increasing percentage of the budget, that the questions are being asked, okay, if the state is going to mandate it, have them kick in something. It'd be nice if they kicked in everything. But kick in something, and that would relieve the pressure and would relieve the burden on the towns to keep providing the quality education for the remaining students that may come at maybe discounted because the cash isn't there because it's being spent by law on special ed. And again, that's...
And on transportation.
And on
That's the key.
transportation.
Transportation,
Yeah,
let's not forget
transportation
that
is a very
one
high
student
number.
that graduated
Yeah.
that was costing us $1 million a year to
Oh, yeah.
transport.
It's a high number. We know that it's a requirement, and the town pays it, and we're glad that it benefits the students it benefits, but the reality is it is expensive, and it takes away from the general population. And so that's something that we are aware of. I don't know if I think the town meeting is aware. I don't know if the general population of the town is aware of the magnitude of what that cost is, and that it's been growing for year by year.
And one last question I have on the schools. Has anybody talked about the cost of educating the students that are currently housed by Milton Academy teachers or Curry College teachers, those that don't pay any taxes because they live in housing? That was something that came up last year in our discussions. Have you heard of any further discussions on that, and about whether or not the colleges are willing to pay for the students that are being educated in our public schools?
I am not aware of any discussions about those. I know that those are issues that certainly we raised
Right.
last year, and that I discussed in cursorily, not in as much detail as we know exists for these students with the town meeting. They're certainly aware. The select board, I believe, is also aware. There is a specific committee that discusses payment in lieu of taxes with the institutions here in town. I do not know what the status of that conversation is. I think at our next meeting, which I will propose to be on the 2 weeks from 2 weeks tonight, which would be the 30th of September.
30th is Rosh Hashanah.
Oh dear. Okay, we can't
Yeah,
do
that's
that.
Rosh Hashanah.
Oh, okay. Do we have Wednesday?
We do.
Wednesday, the 2nd of October? Is that okay? I mean, when is Yom Kippur? That's after Rosh Hashanah, right?
Yes.
It's like a week later?
10 days.
10 days, okay. So we'll be fine. If we do it on the 2nd of October, we can have our next meeting. And we will ask the select board to come and talk to us about the budget. Would you care if I asked the superintendent to come and give us an update? Or whoever's responsible for the school building committee.
Yes.
And
We
we will
should
be...
dive in and talk about all these things.
Oh,
as soon as
Superintendent
possible.
Gormley is the...
Chomping at the bit.
Well, no, her command, I was tremendously impressed when I went that day with them. She knows, everybody knows who she is, she knows who everybody is, and there's a mutual respect that is really wonderful to see. It's very impressive. She knows where, I don't want to say where the bodies are buried because we're talking about a school, but she knows where all the action happens and who's doing what, and she even knows a lot of the kids by name, which is, I think, unbelievable. So I have enormous regard for her, her administrative capacity, and for her ability to keep everything together. I think there's as much a great loyalty to her as a person as well as to her administrative skill. She's really a great asset to the town. And if she and possibly the school building committee chair might come, that might be worthwhile for us to hear. I also think by then we should have drafts of some of the warrant articles that we can actually start to think about and to talk about and to look at in some detail, so that we can kind of kickstart what we're going to have to do in terms of hearings before we actually start to draft our opinions about these things. Mm-hmm. So I did not call the meeting to order. I can't. We'll have our town clerk come and swear us in on the 2nd of October. at which point we will be formal. And if anybody has any questions, I should also welcome our 2 new members, Scott, John, and John Driscoll. We're happy you're joining us. I hope this isn't too much of a baptism of fire. But
Come back next time.
yeah, well, if you come back next time, it means we fooled you again. So that's a good thing. But I hope that we will have. I will say this. I was happy to be reappointed, and I said I would come back because this group was really terrific to work with. It was a remarkably productive and consultative group that just pulled together, and we did some tough stuff last year. We made some decisions and some recommendations that were not easy. I think were agents for change, and I think for good change. And I think we continue to be so, and I'm very honored to be part of this group. It's really a tremendous representation of the town's citizenry, and you should all be very proud of what you do for the town as well. I'm also amazed, I get comments from people I see around town, and I don't even know, who come up and say, well, we saw you on TV, and I'm thinking, my God, you did, really?
On purpose?
Really? I think, what'd you do? The Red Sox must not have been playing that night or something, or whatever.
They were.
Yeah, but it is impressive how many of our neighbors tune in to see what we're talking about, and I think that's a really good thing. I think they appreciate the discussion. I've had a couple of people say, "Wow, you really beat that one to death," and I don't know whether that's a compliment or not, but maybe a little bit of both. Exactly right. But I think it is a testimony to the reality that we do address a lot of complicated issues. We can do that here. The town meeting really can't, and that's really our job to take. Well, we can try. We're not going to get it right all the time. I mean, we do the best we can. I mean, a stop clock is right twice a day too. Yes. But we do our very best, and I think that there's certainly no lack of there's nobody who's timid in this group, which I find is very good, and that's great because none of us has the monopoly on the right thing to do. So I thank you all for coming out tonight. Let's call for our meeting on the 2nd of October at 7 o'clock in the same place, and we'll get down to the business at hand. Thank you very much for coming. Does anybody have any questions before we...
I do. Is there another tour? Because I was wanting to go on that tour for the schools when I was on the school committee. So I would love to have gone.
I bet the superintendent would be thrilled to take
I'll
you.
go too.
She absolutely would.
Yeah, I know she would. Okay, I'll get in touch with her. I'll send her an email and tell her. John, you would too?
Yeah, I heard all about the schools and everything about the money, but there's nothing said about road work. Our roads are really bad.
I agree with you there.
You can't drive down a single road that's not bad.
Well, it's interesting. Chase Berkeley, the DPW director, I think you know.
He said 20 million, but I think it's pretty far, it's more than that.
It may well be. It may well be. Yeah, I don't disagree with you. The other thing, one thing that I've noticed in the last 4 or 5, and I grew up here in Milton, and I remember zipping across town at any hour of the day. It was fine. Has anybody found the traffic to be onerous?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Horrendous.
Yeah, I've heard
What
various.
do you mean, 20 minutes to get to East Milton Square to get my Starbucks? That's
From
fine.
what? From where you live near Milton High?
Yeah.
From Pierce.
Oh yeah. 20 minutes.
Oh, 20 minutes is
you,
good. That's-
You did well.
That's actually really good.
20 minutes to get through the square.
Yeah.
Well, that's part of it. But I mean, just getting across town. I mean, if you want to get on 93 North or South, you can't. You have to allow a half an hour anyway to go up Randolph Ave or Canton Avenue to get there and then onto Blue Hill Avenue. It's really. I don't know if that problem can be solved. These were country roads. Milton was a country town for most of its life. All right,
Bring back dirt roads.
That might do it.
I mean, really.
They wouldn't worry about
Might then have a revenue problem.
Yeah, then we really would have a problem.
Yeah, we're gonna
George,
have
you're
to
gonna
buy
are they
tons
doing a
of
traffic
dirt.
study?
There is a traffic study. I honestly don't know what you do. I mean, what are you going to
Put
do?
up a
Widen
wall.
widen the roads
The
or
select board is a traffic mitigation committee, but I don't know.
charge
what
a
the
toll to
solutions
go
are.
through the town? There's an interesting concept. So all the people on Waze.
problem?
Yeah, that'd solve the problem for sure. All the people on Waze who are
Just make
diverted.
it slightly less appealing, right? I mean, we're just such a cut through now.
Yeah, we are. We really are, and that's been a big problem. But I think these are things these things happen in various committees, or these discussions happen in various committees around the town. Ultimately, they do siphon through us because they do have to go to the town meeting for any approval, and we have to see what they're going to do before it gets to the town meeting. So that's going to be a very interesting discussion too. But I'll send an email to Mary Gormley, the superintendent, and tell her that we have several of the members of the warrant committee who are interested in making the tour, and she will go the extra yard to make sure that that happens. And I'm sure it'll take a while to figure a date that everybody can make, but she's been extraordinarily cooperative, and she loves showing the schools off, and appropriately so. It's a great place. And we'll see what we can get from that. So with that, if there are no other questions, we will see one another on the 2nd of October. We will have a number of things to discuss at that point, and then we'll be off to the races.
Sounds good.
Thank you all very much.
I saw you.